In this movie, we'll be talking about pseudo-selectors. Specifically, we'll start talking about pseudo-classes. If you want to follow along, open up pseudoselectors.html from your working files folder. If you scroll to the very bottom of the page, and you open up the Mozilla Developer Network page on pseudo-classes, you can see even more than we're going to cover in this lesson. Now let's take a look at that page. We've seen pseudo-classes before, believe it or not. :hover is actually a pseudo-class. Pseudo-classes are selectors that target elements, but not always, only in certain states. For example, :hover will target the element, but only when the mouse happens to be over the element. Here are our standard pseudo-classes. Let's go through this list and I'll point out a couple of them. First off, we have checked. That's particularly useful when you're talking about checkboxes. If you have a checkbox and you say my checkbox :checked, the :checked will make it so the selector only applies if the checkbox is actually checked. Similarly, we've got disabled. That works for various form elements. For input elements, we can use :focus. If the user has clicked on the element, :focus will actually work. A lot of people will use that and type something like input :focus, and then change the background color to be a light yellow. That way, whenever the user clicks inside of an input element, the background of that input element will change to light yellow temporarily. We've already covered hover before. In fact, along with hover, we also have link, active, and visited. These all apply to anchor tags, and they've been around for quite a while. Now we also have :first child. You would use first child when you want to target an element if it's the first child of its parent. So for example, ul li :first child. In fact, I could even just say li :first child. Now, li will target every list item in the entire document. Li :first child will target every li in the entire document who is the first child of its parent. So let me show you what that looks like. Now, as you can see, this here is an li. So is this, and so is this, and so is this, but this one is the first child of its parent, this green guy. Same here. And in fact, this big blue guy is also an li. It's the first child of the red guy. This is the second child, and so it doesn't get highlighted. That's how we use first child. Now we can also do li :last child. I'm sure you can imagine what that would do. That will do exactly the same thing, except it'll get the last one. So this one, each of these, and you'll notice this blue guy here is the last child of this red guy. So that's last child. You can also do nth child. So for example, I'm going to target all of the LIs that have a class of child. And I'm going to say opacity, maybe 0.6. If I say :nth child, I can type in nth child 2, and that'll get the number 2 element. The number 2 child, you can see, is always going to be faded out. Now we can also do something like this, 2n. 2n will get every 2. In other words, the second, the fourth, the 6th, the 8th, etc. I can also say 2n plus 1. This syntax means every 2 starting with the first. And now you can see it gets the first, the third, the 5th, etc. You can also type in odd, and we get the same result, or even. That's nth child. Nth child can be very useful, especially when you have long lists or when you have tables. So for example, if you had a table and it had, let's say, 100 rows, you could make every 10th row somehow be different, maybe a little darker. And you can make every even row be a very light gray. That way it's a little easier to go down the list and see where all of the elements start and stop. Now there are a number of these that are similar to first child and last child and nth child. For example, first of type. You can say p: first of type. That'll get the first p within a parent. Not just the p if it's the first child, but just as long as it's the first of its type. So if the first child is an h1 and then you have a bunch of p tags, the first of the p will get targeted. We also have nth last child, that'll do the same as nth child, but counting from the back. We've got nth of type, nth last type. Those will both do the exact same thing, but will constrain what they target down to the type of element that you're targeting. So those are the most popular pseudoclasses. Browser support for all of these varies a little bit, so you're going to have to make sure that these all work on the browsers you're targeting. For the most part, though, these will work on IE9+, and most of them will work on IE8+.